There is a kind of silence in football that speaks volumes. It does not appear in the most obvious headlines. It does not immediately explode across social media and, more often than not, it goes unnoticed by those who only look at results on the pitch. But the attentive supporter recognizes this atmosphere from afar. It is the feeling that something important is being discussed behind the scenes, while the club continues its public routine as normal. At St. James' Park, this sensation has grown stronger again in recent days, bringing a mix of expectation, curiosity, and a slight unease that only those who follow Newcastle United closely can fully understand. When this type of atmosphere sets in, every detail starts to be examined more carefully. An evasive answer in a press conference, a piece of information that quietly emerges from the background, a name that begins to be repeated more frequently by specialist journalists, everything becomes a clue. Everything becomes a signal. Supporters start to connect the dots, even without having all the pieces of the puzzle. And it is precisely in this scenario that stories emerge which, at first glance, seem ordinary, but carry far greater implications than they initially appear to have. In recent days, Newcastle United have been living through exactly this moment. The January transfer window is moving quickly. The fixture list remains demanding, and the club have yet to announce any signings for the first team. For some, this may sound like simple caution. For others, it may point to something deeper, linked to strategic decisions that go beyond the short term. The fact is that, as the clock keeps ticking, the silence remains heavy, fueling debates among supporters, analysts, and journalists. If you follow Newcastle regularly, you know that a lack of movement can also be a form of message, especially when several names continue to be linked with the club, almost always involving reliable sources. This is where curiosity grows. What is really going on? Why do so many rumors appear, yet no deal is finalized? And, above all, what is being prepared away from the spotlight? If you enjoy this kind of in-depth analysis and want to keep following everything closely, it is worth subscribing to the channel so you do not miss any important updates. A young player, on the rise, attracting interest not only from Newcastle, but also from some of the biggest forces in European football. And it is right here that an update comes in that changes the tone of the conversation. Transfer specialist Fabrizio Romano provided details that help explain why the club from Tyneside have been so active behind the scenes, even without official announcements. According to him, Newcastle tried everything to finalize a deal before the battle for the summer window became even more intense. The player in question is Kees Smit, a 20-year-old Dutch midfielder who has been impressing in the colours of AZ Alkmaar despite his young age. Smit has already posted solid numbers in the Eredivisie with 5 goals and 7 assists in 61 appearances, along with consistent performances that have caught the attention of technical scouts across Europe. His game intelligence, passing quality and maturity on the pitch have placed his name on the radar of clubs known for investing heavily in emerging talent. According to Fabrizio Romano, Newcastle United made several attempts to sign Kees Smit before the market entered an even more competitive phase. In his words, the Magpies tried, and tried again. This shows it was not a case of distant monitoring, but a genuine effort to bring the player to St. James' Park. However, as often happens with negotiations at this level, the response was not as straightforward as the club had hoped. Speaking on his YouTube channel, Fabrizio Romano explained that, from his understanding, AZ Alkmaar's intention at this moment is not to negotiate the player during the January window. According to the journalist, an immediate transfer is considered very unlikely, despite all the effort made by Newcastle. Even so, the story is far from over, because the picture changes completely when looking ahead to the next transfer window. Romano highlighted that a major battle is forming for the summer. Real Madrid are said to be monitoring Kees Smits' situation, along with several major Premier League clubs. This turns the player into a highly sought-after asset on the market, increasing not only his value, but also the complexity of any future negotiation. For Newcastle, this means the groundwork being done now could prove decisive later on, even if it does not result in an immediate signing. This kind of behind-the-scenes movement reveals a lot about the club's strategy. Newcastle are not simply reacting to the market, but trying to position themselves ahead of the curve, identifying talents before they become out of reach. The persistent attempt to sign Kees Smit shows a long-term vision, aligned with the sporting project that has been built over recent years. And if you want to keep following detailed analysis like this, with context and reliable information, subscribing to the channel helps a great deal in keeping this work going. Meanwhile, the January window continues without any new signings being announced. So far, the only confirmed movements by Newcastle have been departures. The under-21 duo Cathal Heffernan and Ben Parkinson have left the club permanently, joining Harrogate Town and Falkirk respectively. In addition, Joe White and Harrison Ashby have been loaned to Bradford City until the end of the season, while Antonito Cordero has been sent on loan to Cadiz after struggling to establish himself during a similar spell at Westerlo in Belgium. These departures are part of a natural squad management process, especially when it comes to young players who need regular minutes to develop. However, for supporters, the feeling is that something is still missing. After all, the first-team squad continues to face challenges in a demanding season, and expectations for reinforcements remain high. It is within this context that Eddie Howe's words carry even more weight. Earlier this month, the Newcastle head coach spoke openly about the club's situation in the market. According to Howe, everyone at the club fully supports the transfer process, but there are clear limitations imposed by PSR. He stressed that the issue is not simply wanting to sign players, but understanding what is possible within the rules and what represents the best value, both in January and in the summer. Howe also highlighted a crucial point that often goes unnoticed. Signing the wrong player can become a burden for 3, 4, or even 5 years. For that reason, decisions need to be taken with extreme care. The manager questioned whether the right players are truly available in January, reinforcing the idea that patience and planning can be more valuable than rushed moves. This perspective helps explain why Newcastle pushed so hard for Keys Smith, but did not force an impossible deal. The club assessed the situation, made their approaches, but respected the market context and Aziz Alkmaar's position. At the same time, they remain alert to what could happen in the summer, when conditions may be more favorable, even if competition is even stronger. For supporters, the feeling is a mix of frustration and hope. Frustration at not seeing reinforcements arrive right now, but hope in recognizing that there is a solid plan in place. Fabrizio Romano's update not only clarifies a specific transfer attempt, but also sheds light on how Newcastle are positioning themselves within the European market. If you enjoy following this kind of behind-the-scenes insight, understanding what happens beyond the headlines and staying ahead of the news, it is worth subscribing to the channel right now. That way you will not miss any important updates about the future of Newcastle United, especially at decisive moments like this. The main source of this information is journalist Fabrizio Romano, globally recognized for his credibility in the transfer market, along with official statements from head coach Eddie Howe. Together, these sources help paint a clearer picture of what is happening at St. James Park, even when silence seems to dominate. What is clear is that Newcastle United are far from standing still. The attempts, conversations, and planning continue, even away from the spotlight. And as the market has shown countless times, the most important decisions are often the ones that take the longest to come together. The summer promises to be intense, and this story, by all indications, still has many chapters to come.